Salutations from space and aloha from Earth, friends. Nice to see you here at Storytelling Hour with your host and celestial navigator, Gemini Bread. Happens every week on Wednesday, miércoles, Mercury's Day at 11:11 a.m. Pacific time. And the topic of our journey today, Cazmi and Occultation, lensed through the lights. Get another image on the screen, and we're going to go back to this one. So I'll just say that what is stimulating this particular topic for our explorations today are one that we're in the midst of eclipse season. And of course, eclipse season means occultation, right? We had a lunar eclipse on September 17th, moon partially occulted by the shadow of Earth, which is an amazing thing to do. See, like we actually kind of get to see the shape of our planet, right? Projected onto the moon's surface. And then on October 2nd, we will have a annular solar eclipse, right? The ring of fire solar eclipse, right? And so in that case, sun, almost all of the sun, just a ring of fire remaining, occulted by the moon. What does it mean? What does it do? Well, I've also been personally kind of driven into a deeper dive into those questions, hoping to hear some answers to them or feel some answers to them by other occultations that have been happening locally. One, sadly, I missed, which was the moon occulting Saturn, which would have been visible where I reside in the Bay Area of California at very early hours of Tuesday, September 17th on the calendar. We're really the end of moon day astrologically, because unlike the current construct of flipping the calendar days at 12 a.m. on some clock, astrological time is designed towards shifting at sunrise, right? So 3 a.m. is when it went down around here, and so the sun, of course, had not risen by then. So still on a moon day locally, still on the day of the moon. But here it was the moment of fog, and just really thick fog. So I had woke up, had set my alarm, was excited to get out and experience Saturn occulted by the moon, and my occultation itself was occulted. The same was true at sunset that day when I hoped to see this partial lunar eclipse. There was no moon to be seen. It was occulted by the fog. And then fortunately, I woke early for the next occultation opportunity. In recent time, there's just been so many of these, which was this occultation of Alcyone and also of Merope. Now, those are two stars of the Pleiades. So in both of these images, one taken at 2:14 a.m. and the other 50 minutes later at 3:04 a.m., Merope, one of the seven sisters, one of the Pleiades, was hidden by the moon. That's occultation. I mean, you can have Jupiter occulting a star, or Venus occulting Saturn. You know, that, I mean, at least theoretically. But when we just say occultation astronomically, typically we are referring to occultations by the moon. All right. So if you want to talk about a Venus occultation, I mean, even if you say Venus occultation, we mean moon occulting Venus. But if you say like Venus occulting, Spica, right? We need to say it that way. So typically when we say occultation, we mean an occultation by the moon, moon hiding a star or a moving star, meaning a planet, a wanderer from our point of view as moon passes by, right? So look, moon passes the Pleiades every 27 and a third days. That's a period called a sidereal month, like the month of the stars. Moon aligned to Regulus, the heart of the lion, and 27 and a third days later at Regulus again. Okay, that period of time almost entirely similar to the period called the tropical month, which is moon getting around the tropical zodiac. Moon, if you will, getting around the Earth with respect to the Earth's rotational axis, and therefore our cardinal directions, and therefore the tropical zodiac, which is aligned to Gaia's spine, to the sword of our stone, to the world tree, to the axis of our daily rotation. Okay, like so many sacred systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the signs of the tropical zodiac are directionally aligned, and it starts right there with Earth's North Pole, which leans in every moment forever north towards the place on the ecliptic, the path of the sun, that we astrologers call 0 degrees tropical Capricorn. It happens to be right above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn, just as the 0 degrees Tropic of Cancer is north above Earth's Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn south, that point toward which Earth's South Pole always leans, and it's above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn. Okay, so the tropical month is basically just the moon moving through the signs. The sidereal month is the moon moving through the stars. And I mean, one of these periods is like 27.32166 days long, I think. And the other one's like 27.32159 days. It's like very little difference, but that difference is important. It's due to what's called the precession of the Earth, the axial precession. And here I go, going all into the weeds once again, or all into the stars. But I feel for me in my own process, it's like start with the measurable, start with what I can see, start with the astronomy. And from there, and from my experience and my witness, how does this bring forth the astrology or the correspondences, right? What is the quantity, the measurable, the astronomy? What is the quality, the immeasurable, the correspondence? All right. And so I was very much like in that mode when I was driving in my car on the way to see this occultation event. My daughter, Maya, is named for one of the 7 sisters. She's actually, this is the star that astronomy these days calls Maya. And so here on the right at this 3:04 a.m. image, this might be the closest moon Maya conjunction I ever see. Other places on Earth, actually, if clouds allowed, would have seen Maya, this star, occulted also, right? This is part of the amazing trip of occultations, is they really help us tune into the importance of parallax. I spoke about this some last week. I'll speak about it today again. Parallax being, let me stop this share and then we'll get back to it. So for example, here comes an occultation, right? Like I can't see you now as if you were my computer camera. You're not, you're so much more. You're an amazing being. You're a collection of amazing beings all around the world. What a treat to have you so close and experiencing this moment with me. Thank you for the presence of your beautiful presence. Okay, but now I can't see you. But my mouth could. What if I just flip that script? Or let's do this, you know? My whatever, I'm going to be accused of being some kind of Illuminati. You know, I hopefully you can see what I'm trying to get after here, right? Like if somebody's living on this side of face, they can't see you. But if somebody lived just this far away, they could, right? Like from down there. And that's like the moon, where we on Earth are witnessing the moon against the backdrop of the stars, including the wandering stars, which is what planetus means in Greek, right? The wanderers. The moon will look slightly, the moon will appear to be in any given moment in a slightly against the backdrop of the fixed stars in a different way between even like San Francisco and LA. That's parallax. So there's some great astronomers and astrophotographers these days who are now, for example, taking pictures of a lunar eclipse, which, as long as clouds allow and it's nighttime where you are, a lunar eclipse can be seen. And nighttime is half of the Earth, right? So lunar eclipses are seen by half of the Earth, actually a little bit more because Earth is spinning. But anyway, one thing I love about lunar eclipses is on one level, get to feel how connected we are because we get images of the same astronomical event from, maybe Australia and Arizona at the same time. Is that possible? Places cannot be more than half a world away. Okay. But when we do, like, let's say we get images of a lunar eclipse from New York City and also from London, those eclipsed images will have slight differences. They will be seen again in a different way against the backdrop of this constellations, against the fixed stars. Really have a hard time articulating that for some reason. Somebody tell me how to say what I'm trying to say here, please. Let's see what you've said so far. Hello, Discerning Light. Hello, Zelnery. Hello, Linda, who asked, would I say Alcyone is Alcyone fortunate? Let's get back to that cool question. Lorelei says, greetings from Arcata. Yeah, so Arcata, not too far from where I live in the Bay. We would have seen this Pleiades occultation in a different way. And Nadine, who's reporting in from Baja, where this Pleiadian occultation was also visible, clouds allowing, would have seen it in a different way. And I like seeing that some of y'all are saying hello to each other. That's what we're talking about. Let's have community. Let's celebrate the stars together. And Tracy here says hello as well. So many of you in the Instagram space, what's going on? Hey, Rita, long time no see. Hey, Selena. All right. Hello, Cassiopeia. Many amazing beings here in this moment. Hello, Laura. Greetings from Seattle, says Laura, where the sky is almost always occulted. All right, so let's play a little bit more with the parallax point of view, actually the point of view in which I was able to see this Pleiadian occultation the other day. Would have been slightly different than where I intended to see this from. I intended to see this from my backyard here in El Sobrante Hills of Richmond, California, and that wasn't happening. I had my alarm set for like 2:30 a.m., I think. So let myself get a little bit of sleep. Hard enough having a 14-week-old baby. But I woke up at 1. And then I looked out and I was like, man, this occultation also occulted by Bay Area fog, not happening for me. Then it was like, to the van, man. And I just hopped in the ride and I started driving east. I started driving away from the ocean, away from the marine layer, away from San Francisco. And I ended up in Pittsburgh, California. And even the story there, I wish I had these pictures to show you. I ended up at this like Pittsburgh, California historic museum in Old Town Pittsburgh, California, which previously I didn't know existed. And I parked right in front of the statue of Coach Smiley Cowlitz or something. I'm looking for the pictures in my iPhone here. Coach Smiley Jim Kamitz or something, who was born in December of 1913. We read on the statue. December 16th, 1931, my bad. He played for the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball, right? No, the professional football, Pittsburgh Pirates. I didn't know that was a thing. It was way back in the day. And sadly got injured as a professional footballer, but then he went coach. And I read on this statue, started Pop Warner football, right? So football for young ones here in Pittsburgh, California, which is pretty close to where I live. Oh, it was like a 45-minute drive. And then it tells me the record of his teams, the Pittsburgh Mallards, which is pretty impressive. And yeah, a little secret about Gemini Brett is I dig football. It's watching football. Go Hawks. Anyway, we might be looking at some Seahawks footballers charts on one of these storytelling hours, by the way, because I think it's an interesting thing to pursue from an astrological perspective, as all things are. So, of course, when I look at a birth date on a statue and I'm out randomly taken to this place just because I'm trying to get away from the fog so I can see a Pleiadian occultation like this, of course, I'm going to cast that chart. And it turns out that 1931, when Coach Smiley was born, was another time when the Pleiades could be occulted. They were not in December. Well, they were actually later in December after his birth. They were not on December 16th, 1931, which I think was the birth of Coach Smiley. But they were later. And how much of that do I want to show you? Well, I want to show a lot of it to you, but you know what? I think today I'm going to get to the point first, and then we'll go explore. Because I know sometimes my work, well, I imagine sometimes my work can be frustrating, or can be frustrating in the way that I am sometimes frustrated with others' work, where they really kind of show you all their work before they just get to the solution. That's how, again, I'm just designed. I'm very resistant to taking others' beliefs as truth, especially if they tell me it's the only truth. I tend to run from those people as fast as I can. And I'm very much interested in discovering my astrology through the astronomical experience. And I think that will give me just a moment to speak about what is the difference between astronomy and astrology. We are often taught about they used to be the same thing. I don't believe so. And to do this, yeah, let me just honor also. I'm going to show you the image, the thumbnail for this talk. This beautiful collection of images, one, of course, like a yin yang created out of moon and sun, and then you see planets nearby. Looks like maybe Mercury's not there. They're just too small for me to see. Hold on, I got to go to that view. It looks like Venus and Earth and Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Oh, and I guess Pluto. It's like Mercury hiding on there somewhere that I can't see, perhaps. Anyway, this comes from the work of Andrew. I can't remember Andrew's last name. He doesn't share it too much, so maybe it'd be better for me not to say it. Like it's not on the bio page of his site even, or the about page of his site. So why don't I just, oh no, it is on his Instagram, Andrew McCarthy. Let me share my screen in a different way so we can go honor this amazing astrophotographer. And I promise you that's going to bring me to some kind of point. What's the point? It's a podcast I intend to start at some point. All right, so Andrew McCarthy, this character, look at this, Saturn's egress in real time. I'm not sure I'm seeing, oh, that would be Saturn coming back from the occultation, I guess. I didn't quite see it. I'm definitely seeing this, and I'll take you to my Facebook page, which is Gemini Brett Astrology. If you're in that place, please give it a follow and some support and the like. So you'll see at the top there, just above this one of our current journey together, which I'm beaming also to Instagram and YouTube. Cosmic Background Studios is the best in the game. And I'm so grateful to see these images of last week's Saturn occultation. I missed it. And even if I didn't, I was not going to see it like this. And very few people did. And I'm sure actually even in the moment, though, Andrew has amazing telescopes, it didn't look just like this either, because, you know, the current technology allows these astrophotographers, these great astrophotographers, to take multiple images of an experience and then stack those images together in such a way that we can bring out details like in the lunar surface that have never been seen before, right? Not just because he has a better telescope than Galileo Galilei did, right? But because he also has amazing cameras and processing technology and amazing creative gift and skill. All right. So why did I go here now? Well, first of all, I wanted to show you some images of the Saturn occultation. Here's one where we get to see the entire moon and Saturn there. I also wanted to go here to give Andrew McCarthy some credit for the illustration I used for the thumbnail. Check him out, Cosmic Background at Instagram, or Cosmic Background Studios on Facebook, or cosmicbackground.io is Andrew's site. Wallpapers, downloads, gifts and accessories, fine art prints. I'm telling you, someday when I have the dough, I'm going to buy a gigantic one of these. And that's a lot of dough. So I don't know that that's going down, but I love this image so much, where you can see during a lunar eclipse, because he stacked these many moments of that lunar occultation, or in this case, it's like terrestrial occultation of the moon, right? The blood moon, the total lunar eclipse, the moon moving through the shadow of Earth. And you can see here the shape of Earth, right? Let's see if I can make that big, right? So the moon is 3/11ths the size of the Earth by diameter. You get to see that a little bit there. You also get to see that the moon is not moving right through the center of Earth's shadow, which means the lunar eclipse is not exactly on the lunar nodes, and other amazing things. Next to that image, we see an image of a Mars occultation. So moon occulting Mars. I actually got to see that one, and I learned so much at that time. I would suggest, though, looking back, when I reflect on what I was experiencing at that time, where we had a kind of small crew of people here in Berkeley, California, at the Cesar E. Chavez Memorial Solar Calendar site to witness that Mars occultation, reflecting back on some of the vibes between, yeah, I guess I'll say like competing politics. It was kind of in the midst of a bunch of lockdown crazy and stuff, between people who came to this small gathering. Like there was a lot of Mars there. I got to go back to that chart. But I also heard tales about somebody who, for seemingly very small crimes, was locked in, it was imprisoned in I think a Navy aircraft carrier, and told me about how in that kind of prison, you're not allowed to sit down. So you have to stand in place, and somebody's watching there to make sure you don't stop standing. I was like, damn. So there seems to be maybe something crazy Martian there. It sounds like Mars and Pisces, by the way. I can't remember if that's what the truth was at that time. And I'm not going to go there now, but I wanted to kind of offer this as, how do we know what some kind of fringe astronomical event would mean astrologically? How do we know what any astronomical event does? And so some of that, we trust the ancients. We go back to the old texts. we know, which many of them now just finally being translated or recovered, that they were burned at the stake, like so many of their practitioners, and lost to the sands of time, but somehow kind of found again. Groups like Project Hindsight, who are translating some of the ancient texts, are bringing back some knowledge of how astronomical events were viewed in ancient Babylon and Egypt and Greece and the like, And so what did they say? I mean, oftentimes when we look at some of these old delineations of astronomical events by the ancient astrologers, we see that we approach it very differently in modern times, or some do. And right now there's this kind of divide or schism in astrology between the so-called modern astrologer and the traditional astrologer. But it also offers a time for this renaissance, kind of reclaiming some of the ancient and combining it with what has been discovered since. And out of that, we find the child of the old and the new, something like that. And that's where I think many of us are inclined. So Winter says this, he's a true scientist. Through observation and documentation, we can extrapolate trends and patterns, right? And this is the, and we stand on the shoulders of the ancestors, right? Beautiful Winter. Absolutely. And I think we expect that this is what was done. That the ancients recorded enough lunar eclipses, and that they, at the time of the lunar eclipse, witnessed what was going on Earth. Was there some kind of cataclysmic event? Was there a death of a king, which shows up in the old omen lists, Did somebody just feel that that's what it would be? Do you know how much of this was approached through the scientific method versus kind of channeled, or whatever we might say, which would be about as non-scientific as possible, according to at least the rationalistic training of modern science programming. Was it just that somebody witnessed enough occultations of the Pleiades, or let me get more specific, of Alcyone? And if somebody knows how I should pronounce the name of that star, I will type it here. I could sure use the help. Language is really not my forte. Alcyone is Alcy1, Alky1. Oh wait, no, that's a guy I used to know. Alcyone is how I've been pronouncing it recently, and I have no idea. One of the Pleiades. And you know what? Let's just pronunciation. So remember when I said I was going to just get to the point and then explore? I can't roll that way. So join me for a wonder magical mystery tour if you'd like. And by the end, we will find something together. Julian's God. All right, I did pretty good. So I don't know if you could hear that. I can't share screen with sound easily here, but so he says in Greek, Alcyone, though in English, often Alcyone. So I think I'll start saying Alcyone. cool. So Alcyone was one of the Pleiades, one of the daughters of Atlas and Pleione. So was Maya, Electra, Merope, Tegeta, Kaleno, right? And I'm not getting them all. Sterope. I think no, Asterope and Sterope are the same. Merope, a different one. Okay. So we should go learn about each of them individually sometime. Well, how would we go about that, right? And one question is, when the moon occults a star, what does it do? When a moon occults Saturn, what does it do? And let me say, to just get back to the theme of our journey today, what about when the sun hides a star from our point of view? And about the special condition that some ancient astrologers called Cazmi. What does it mean when a planet or a star, right? So a planet, a wandering star, or a fixed star is conjunct sun. It's Cazmi. What happens? So you see here, Cazmi and occultation lens through the lights. Now, I don't know Andrew at Cosmic Background. My hope is that Andrew, who's creating these amazing images of astronomical experiences. By the way, like, he went to Mount Mauna Kea to go experience that Saturn occultation. It was kind of in the best place to be able to have that experience. Let's get back here again, and I'll show you a map of the places on Earth that had the opportunity to witness that Saturn occultation. Thanks to In the Sky. Where is that? Somewhere. Hi, Maya. Hi, Venus. Maybe it's not shared. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. So hopefully this is on your screen. But this is like where the visibility of the lunar occultation of Saturn was on September 17th, 2024. Actually would have been the 18th, by the way, I believe, in Australia. And you can see Hawaii right in the middle of that thing, okay? Also, you can see Hawaii right in the middle of the ocean. And this is one of the reasons why astronomers have, I mean, we might say, committed the sacred crime of building these gigantic telescopes on the most sacred, well, who am I to say? But from what I understand, the most sacred space of the island of Hawaii, which many call the Big Island, right? Hawaii, Mauna Kea is, and some argue this is actually true of the volcano now dormant called Haleakala, the House of the Sun on Maui. Some say it's true of Mauna Kea. Regardless, it works for both. They are taller from foot to crown than Mount Everest. So now Mount Everest's peak is the closest to space, right? So it's the highest point of Earth. But the foot of Mount Everest is also high, right? So you start your climb from a place where you're already well out of breath. Some of you maybe have done that. Now, you're not going to get to the foot of Mauna Kea because it's beneath the water. No, actually, you know what? That's not true. Just from like where you start your climb on Mauna Kea, and you're not allowed to take rental cars up there. Where are you? I'm not talking about my own experience, because like it's bad to take a car through that many into pressureless space, right? And so as you're driving up Mauna Kea, and you can't drive to the top. Unfortunately, there still is much of Mauna Kea that's preserved only for practitioners of sacred tradition, of indigenous people in Hawaii, right? But on the way up, and where you can get to, is this kind of astronomer zone where there's all these gigantic telescopes, and there's also a space in the observation deck where you can be. The one time I've been up, I was fortunately guided by a wonderful woman who is studying hula there, and she helped guide me to a place that was a good place to give an offering before you go, and try to do that right, you know? Because, yeah, I mean, I've often been asked where in the debate of gigantic telescope, but on a sacred mountain, do I lean? And it's don't put a fucking telescope on a sacred mountain. And, you know, one of the shameful things that's happening there is our technology will increase. They'll build a new giganticer telescope next to the previous gigantic telescope. And now people, even if they stop using the previous one, which I don't think you should if it's there, it won't be taken down. And so, like, when you look to the peaks of these volcanoes at Mauna Kea on Hawaii, or at Haleakala on Maui, you just see, especially on sunny days, just these gleaming, gigantic, you know, telescope observatory buildings. And it's heavy on the heart of the one who respects indigenous traditions, and that these are the people who should decide whether or not we are building gigantic science instruments, you know, not the colonialists. So generally speaking, I live in that realm. Go build your fucking telescope somewhere else, but please build it, because I'm down with checking out nebula and black holes and whatever you see. But you know what? There's places where the conditions might not be as ideal, but you can actually go build your telescope, and you're not disturbing the most sacred space of, you know, deeply held indigenous sacred tradition, obviously. But sadly, that's not obvious to conquerors. So let me just leave that there, or else we're going to go into a whole deeper dive of a place I didn't want to be. But it's still, for me, relevant to the question of what is astronomy versus what is astrology. And they used to be one and the same, right? Did they? Did they really? I mean, does anyone actually, just while we're here, how about a show of hands? In the case of building telescopes on sacred land, I guess if you're for the telescope, write science. If you're for the no telescope, write sacred. Does anybody want to play? And I'll read them as they come in. So I will say that less so on Maui, unfortunately, which is the island that I spent most time, even before I met my partner, Anna. But her son, Koa, was born on Maui, and so we try to take him back there as much as we can, you know? They say the mountain closest to your birthplace is your grandfather, and the body of water closest to your birthplace is your grandmother, and I like that. And so it's nice to take Koa back to that space. It's going to be really nice. We're going in November to introduce his sister, Maya, to the energy of that beautiful land that's taught me so much. And of course, everybody here, like Laura and Terranian and Shauna and Linda and Zelnari and Dawn, is like sacred, 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 sacred. Nobody's saying science, right? Now, let's keep the sacred science sacred by honoring the scientific, and scientific by honoring the sacred. Eileen here says sacred too, and her name is Pele Flows, so obviously she's going to go that way. Terranian, woo, so Mount Diablo is my grandfather. Yeah, and maybe find out the older names for that mountain, which clearly has been given a name in Spanish, but I would imagine maybe by the Spaniards who came, but I wonder who renamed that amazing mountain here in the East Bay, as we call it now, of California, as we call it now, Mount Diablo, Mount Devil, right? I'm guessing that's not similar to what it was once called. Just as Devil's Tower, right, in the so-called Black Hills, was by the Lakota people of that land called the Bear's Den. So Mount Tamalpais, which is the mountain I'm currently closest to, I wonder where that name comes from. And Kevin writes, then again, isn't all of creation sacred? Yeah. And I mean, you know, I feel like we can learn a lot by asking questions like, why is war sacred? Because if all of creation is sacred, well, war is part of creation because here it is. But we start getting into pretty tricky territory there, right? So there are words I could use that make it even more challenging. Okay, so anyway, we're on a weird avenue now, but let me just say this. For me, if I present something like Cazmi and Occultation, lensed through the lights as a topic of exploration, and again, if we were doing this together in community, and we have a space at the School of Astrology to do that, that's called constellations, then I would feel that it's more powerful because I would not be the only one talking, you know. But when I set the intention of doing this together, like I don't want to just only reveal my findings to you or what's kind of landing for me. I want to experience this, right? And so part of for me, the reason for doing this every week is I'm going to get to learn not only by the things that you have to share here, but by like the weird places we go, that, and so I'm not like making a slideshow. I do beautiful slideshows. One of the reasons is to help the information come across. Another one is to keep me on track, and like it's going to get me through in a certain amount of time. And according to kind of linear thought, which is not my forte, but I am trying to ditch the linear thing for cyclical experience more, And so I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with honoring that my meanderings are taking me to a place for a reason that maybe I can't know, And people who are here and come back week after week are probably okay with it because that's just how I roll. All right. What does this have to do with science and the sacred? What does this have to do with astronomy and correspondences? Everything. What does this have to do with how we might learn what Cazmi or occultation means, not by reading the pages of the ancients or applying a theory and seeing that it works. We are very we can potentially fall prey to confirmation bias in that approach, right? So for a good example is traditionally Mars is said to be the domicile lord of Scorpio. People like to use the word rulership. I don't love it, but whatever. Modern astrologers say Scorpio. And then you say, well, why does Scorpio is ruled by Pluto? And you can say, well, here's all of these reasons. Like, I mean, first of all, they smell a lot alike one another, Scorpio and Pluto. And you're like, all right. But when I apply that technique, it works. Okay, well, have you ever applied Pluto rules Gemini? See if it works. So it's one of the dangers of astrology is that, and it doesn't stop with astrology at all, but like, you're using this code of rules and believing that they are the truth, and typically feeling that this is because it was through the scientific method, right? I think Winter said this beautifully before. Through observation and documentation, we can extrapolate trends and patterns. And we just kind of assume that that's what was done by the ancients, the ancestors whose shoulders we stand upon. But do we actually know? Have we read that? Or if we just read people say this is what it is, and then you go use that, and then you see that it works, and so that confirms that it's right. Well, unless we're willing to disprove a similar set of rules that say a different thing, it would be hard to really confirm that what we're up to is the truth. You feel me? Hard for me to articulate that, but I know you hear what I'm trying to say. So what does an occultation of Alcyone mean? Or the Pleiades at all? I did want to finish this thing about this kind of mixed, I won't call it a blessing because I'm reminded this by Ask the Pool Man. I'm involved with the Tongva tribe and others in Southern California. Thank you for bringing the Native American issue up in their land. Yeah. It's a hard place to go. And I really appreciate the We Are Mauna Kea movement for first opening my ears to the necessity of such an exploration, and Standing Rock being another place that was really helpful. And I really appreciate elders of Northwestern tribes like the Salish tribes who are very generous with their time and their teachings for many of us who were in community up there when I lived in Seattle for a long time. Yeah, so I mean, a nice thing about Hawaii is that there aren't bright streetlights and all of the light pollution. Why? Because of the astronomers. So there's this really weird paradox where the astronomers have built telescopes on the sacred mountain, but because they did, now Hawaii looks more natural. Like it doesn't have all of the crazy light pollution. You can still see the stars, like down at the beach where it ain't freezing, but you put the telescope on the mountain. Why? Because you're up above all of the humidity and the like, right? But there's other islands where people never lived that have mountains. That's all I'm saying. Might be a little trickier for people to get there, but if you're rich enough to build the biggest telescope in the world, sort it the fuck out. Part of my language, friends, but that's kind of how I feel in that realm. Well, okay, well, what does this have to do with astrology and astronomy? So, as I was kind of getting to before, I don't know Andrew McCarthy. And so, for example, I don't know if Andrew McCarthy, even though I'm giving him credit, would be cool with me utilizing this beautiful image he's created. I assume for him, literally out of photographs that he's taken of all of these planets, which by the way would mean this is Mercury and this is Venus, not the Earth, because he took these photographs, right, from Earth. So I thought I saw Earth and the moon, but that must be Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Moon, Sun, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, which means he's taken a photograph of Pluto. I would love to be able to ask him about this and speak with him about this. I don't know that, for example, Andrew McCarthy, who is this beautiful astrophotographer, would want an astrologer to honor him in such a way of Cosmic Background Studios is the best in the game. And I'm so grateful to see these images of last week's Saturn occultation. Thank you, Andrew. Right? Now, on one level, like Andrew sells prints of these beautiful creations that he makes. And so on that level, I'm sure no press is bad press. And I don't know how much he's tied into like astronomical circles, but I will say I was once attacked by using an image that, first of all, was a Hubble telescope image. Who paid for that? Us. Like if you're in the United States, like tax dollars. But the particular image that I had used was patented by whoever like photoshopped it. And I don't know that they use Photoshop, by the way, but you hear what I'm saying, right? And on their site, they're like, anybody can use this except astrologers. And because an astrologer myself had utilized this beautiful image of I think it was of the Eagle Nebula, it came after me. And I was like, my bad. And he's like, cease and desist. So I took it down. But it's like that, right? Like astronomers these days are typically programmed in rationalist science reality to just vehemently hate astrologers to the point of, yeah, I took a pretty picture and I want everybody in the world to use it unless you're an astrologer because you are the devil. And so I don't think Andrew McCarthy is wired that way, but I'm sad to say that I've seen it a bunch. And so we can very much in that regard see the difference between astronomy and astrology today, which I didn't know that was going to be the topic of our exploration today. Suddenly it is, looking at the clock. And that's why we had to start calling this storytelling hours. But I think it's important because it has so much to do with my own process, and that's what I wanted to share a bit with you today, and some of the results that came forward, maybe. All right. So, though they are things that I must say are of faith, and I don't mean like faith being the belief system you were told is true and you just believe it, whether or not, you would question it. I mean faith being the things that you have through your own experience found to be real, though because they are things you cannot see, occultation, and therefore point to or share, you just know they are real. For me, that's a much better definition of faith. Yeah, and I see there's a little bit of a friendly debate about what science is and is not there. So, by the way, I've also found some open-minded astronomers who are willing to talk about the potential of planets actually participating with our energetic experience on Earth. I've seen typically some astronomers willing to have what I would consider more open-minded and open-hearted conversations with me than initially they were once I've proven my astronomical understanding to them. So there's been times when I'm like out, typically, by the way, in like sacred sites like Chaco Canyon, gazing at a thing, and somebody else is, and they're like, "You're into this too?" I'm like, "Yeah." See, notice that everyone else is asleep. I am, and how amazing that like we won't see this again. I remember at Chaco Canyon specifically telling kind of the resident astronomer there, like, it's a shame that we can't go into the site right now because that winter solstice alignment that astronomy has found to be part of the design of these sacred kivas and other structures is now aligned to the galactic center. And it won't happen like this for another 26,000 years. And he's like, "What? That's not true. What do you mean?" And I told him about precession and galactic alignment. He's like, "Oh shit, that is true." And he is the local resident astronomer, so that means he's going to get to take what I taught him and go do it. Well, I'm stuck on the other side of a gate. That doesn't mean I'm cool. It means I'm sad, right? But who knows? Maybe then that astronomer then will open that space on certain days of the year, right? And anyway, that astronomer then became open to me. It's like, "Whoa, dude, like, where did you learn this stuff?" And I talked to him about some of my teachers, astrologers. And while typically many of the rationalist scientists of our day, as soon as you hear astrology, you just shut it down and walk away, he had already seen that maybe I had a thing or two to say that was worthy of his time. See what I'm saying? By the way, MTCW would be a typo for meta, I assume, but maybe not, just to respond to some of the common thread that's going on over there, like metaphysics. Right. So what would astronomers say about an occultation? They say it's a cool thing to look at. It's a good thing we got a photograph. What is the difference between astronomy and astrology? Were they ever once one? I used to believe so. I will say that the astrologers of old were all great astronomers too. Ptolemy would be an example. Ptolemy probably more of an astronomer than an astrologer. Geminos. I mean, just go on and on. Like back in the day, you had a relationship with the actual sky if you were going to practice this craft. You didn't have computers that you could just cast a chart with. Eventually you had tables, and that goes way back. Like as a fly on the wall, I kind of feel like Alexandria, the kind of melting pot through which Western astrology as we know it was born, was a place where experiential astronomical astrology started to die because like the tables were getting better and better, and so you could cast a chart inside the library walls instead of out underneath the amazing powers of the sky. The sky has amazing powers. One thing I have very much respected about modern day astronomers is, though I don't think they would use words like ceremony behind their gatherings, well, many astrologers are hiding under the deepest rock beneath the rock from the shadowy forces of an eclipse. Many of the astronomers are out there with their scopes, hanging out, getting together, having clubs out under the stars, actually working with the night sky, cheering as the eclipse is going down and all that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I would love for them to experience that ceremoniously and in a sacred way, but look, they do them. What I say is this, like, astronomy is the measurable side, the quantities of the heavenly happening. Astrology is not the immeasurable quality side. It's actually the rainbow bridge between the measurable and the immeasurable. And that is astronomy and correspondences, right? So where do these correspondences come from? Do they come from the scientific method, as Winter was saying before, like long observations, documentations, you see enough moon occult the Pleiades, and these things happen on Earth, and so then it means that. Or is it you go out and you drive away from the San Francisco fog, and on the way, you're on your YouTube live stream, as I was the other day. And part of it was like, I want to get my words out before I go experience this thing. So instead of going to talk to it, I can listen to it. And by the way, when I say like listen to a heavenly event, I mean with the ears of my heart. And so it is difficult, as you can tell, for me, maybe more than for most, to shut down the mind or to soften it a bit. Though my heart, I feel, is very open. I'm strong in the emotional reality. It's that bit that I want to lead with. And people who have been outside with me have heard me say many times, look, shame will slam the door closed. You're out there, you're like, I've been studying astrology for 20 years. And I can't actually point to which one's Mars and which one's Saturn. It's okay. Nobody showed you that. Don't go out there shaming yourself like you just slammed the door to the mysteries. And you also don't go out there and saying, Saturn, you are the malefic of the day sect. And you know what I mean? Like, don't tell them what they are. Listen. Or why go at all? And it's very hard to listen or allow ourselves to experience. Let's talk about people. It's very hard to experience a person if you have all of these preordained notions about them. I just got a message from an old friend who was like, hey, look, I wonder if you can help me with this. I have an astrologer roommate, and we're looking for other roommates, and she just keeps like nixing them because she's looking at their charts and saying things like, oh, I can't live with a Scorpio. Do you think astrology should be applied this way? And of course, my answer is no. So like having this idea that you know who a person is, or having this idea that you know what an animal is, or having this idea that you know what a planet is based upon what has been said about that person or that animal or that planet, it completely eliminates you from the opportunity to meet that person. Having the idea that because somebody's wearing the wrong colored hat, that means they are racist and bigoted and closed-minded and all of these things, and you want nothing to do with them, obviously eliminates you from the opportunity to have an experience with that person. And you have been deceived. And I'm not pointing at any of y'all, I don't think, or me, or maybe I should. Okay. And so it's really hard for the astrologer who's well studied to go out and actually experience this guy. Because we spend so much time telling a thing what it is, knowing too much about it to actually learn anything about it. Do you see what I mean? And so my approach, my hope is that I can turn some of this off, especially about the things that we don't have rules for, like a Pleiadian occultation. What is that? And just get to have an experience. And by the way, like, what did I experience the other day? I experienced that I parked in front of the statue of Coach Smiley. And his amazing record of Pop Warner football Super Bowls. And I think, yeah, let me just leave that there. I experienced, because I parked in stalls where there were car chargers nearby, that I was stepping away from like the shadows next to the brick wall of the Pittsburgh museum back to the street. A car drive by at 3 a.m, and somebody's like, yo, you stepping off that charger? And I was like, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? And then it took me a while. I was like, what? It's like, you coming off that charger? I was like, what? It's like, oh, they're talking about the car chargers. I was like, no, I'm in his van. There's not one in that spot, right? And I sped off after seeing that another one was open. And then later somebody dropped off a Tesla to get charged, and then they drove away back to whatever party they were at 3 a.m, I assume, right? So is that part of it? I heard in the background a Bob Marley song. And, you know, like Bob Marley songs are part of my own mythical soundtrack. Like, it's just been very important in my lifetime, especially when I was younger. And that's actually not an uncommon experience for me, not only because Bob Marley's great and a lot of people listen to his music, but in my sky experience. And by the way, this one didn't end up being a Bob Marley song at all. I knew the song that was, but then it turned out to be just some awesome kind of mariachi tune that had a bass line that was somewhat similar. So as the car that was playing it got closer to me, I was like, oh, interesting. So where am I in like the Bob Marley mariachi, which already has such like intriguing images of multiculturalism, right? Like there's like polka in this Mexican music I was hearing, you know, like whatever. So like all that, like, does that have anything to do with the Pleiadian occultation, or was it just something random that I was experiencing during this thing? How much of this should be interpreted through my own lenses of my experience of a thing? And even if the answer to that is all of it, how much of that then would apply to anyone else's experience of a thing, or how they should delineate a thing? Do you see what I mean? Okay. So for me, astronomy and astrology, it worked like this, or let me call it astronomy and correspondences. We needed to do astronomy. See the lunar phase calendars on animal bones. See constellations in cave paintings, you know. Why? Because they're beautiful. Yes, and also, if you're a nomadic people, you better follow the cycles of the lights. You better understand the relationship of Earth and Sun, at least how it expresses on Earth. Because if you need to go over there at the time of the year when the berries are in the bush, you need to know something about the time of the year. How do you do that? Stars, especially the one called sun, right? And other celestial timings like months, the phases of the moon, carved in animal bones, the oldest calendar we're aware of. Okay, well, if you're doing that, if you're tracking those cycles, like let's say you're doing that for survival as a nomadic gatherer hunter people, or as an agricultural people, what's going to happen to you? Dare I say, what's going to happen if it hasn't already? And I know nothing about this man, so I'm not going to use his name again, but what's going to happen to, let's say, like astronomers who work at Chaco Canyon long enough and engage with the mysteries of the heavens from that place, if they weren't already inclined towards the sacred, and that caused them to take this job at a sacred space, if they weren't just kind of anthropologically or archaeologically or dark sky inclined to take a kind of secluded job, do you think the sacred's not going to come through? Even if they have very rigid walls like the walls that I had, thanks to my science programming and the scholastic shenanigans of our day, you are more likely to. If you travel to Mauna Kea to experience an astronomical event, because it's on a very tall mountain above the humidity in a very dark space in an island far, far away from bright city lights, you're going to see the astronomical event. What else is going to happen for you? And this, for me, is how correspondences came in. People had experiences. Now, from a scientific method point of view, I'm not anti-science. I am a scientist. We would like somebody to go then create a hypothesis, have some measure of experiment, right? Like a great gift for me is, well, I can't necessarily say it's rigid science. I am able to apply the syntax rules of astrology in readings with amazing, open-minded, open-hearted people who are really living their lives every day, 5 days a week, many times a day, and see that it works. And by the way, sometimes my astrology doesn't work at all. And in almost every opportunity I have to sit with somebody and to hear more about their story while I'm working with their natal chart and timings, I learn astrology through practicing astrology. It's why one of the reasons why I always tell people, don't wait until you're a master. That's impossible. Get to work. That's the only place you're really going to learn. Expectation is the enemy of surprise. Surprise opens the doorway to experience. Experience is the only place where wisdom dwells. And how much of an experience are you allowing yourself to have? Right. And so many of our kind of like blocks and conditions will actually keep us from having an experience. Like there's nothing sacred in the sky or those kinds of events. So you just told it not to give you any of that. So what happened for me when I, having suffered occultations of 2 occultations, finally woke up early enough and to be the van man and drive just as far as I could. If you want some humor and some science, you can check out the live YouTube on my YouTube page. Just Gemini Brett at YouTube and click on the live thing, and you'll see me driving out towards this lunar occultation, saying things about what I wonder what it does. And I'm particularly drawn to this one because, again, we've named our daughter Maya after one of the 7 sisters, after one of the Pleiades. The daughters of these 2 stars down here. This is Atlas and Pleione. As they're named now, I think maybe not by the ancients. I'm not sure. I would imagine that these were known as Atlas and Pleione by the ancients, but I'm not sure that, for example, this star and this triangle was called Maya by the ancients. That might be kind of a newer thing, and I'm just not positive, okay? But anyway, in this 2:14 a.m. shot, you can see, and I've drawn an arrow to it, right? This is Alcyone, which is the brightest of the Pleiades, and it's often the star that is used by astromagicians, for example, when they work with the Pleiades, like according to the tradition, at least like the Renaissance magic tradition, the Pleiades are one of the 15 Bohemian stars, the magical stars of Mercury, along with friends like Sirius and Antares and Aldebaran and Arcturus and Spica and Deneb el Jedi and Al-Qaid and Algol and others, okay? But the Pleiades are the only one that are actually like a cluster, not a star. And so like, well, this cluster spans like half a degree. So which one do you choose? Well, I might choose Maya, or we might expect that each of them has kind of a different story to tell. Now, so at 2:14 a.m., this moon And I gotta say, this is the first time I've like stacked some photos and I did okay with it. Like you have to turn the light that your camera is receiving, like you have to shut it way down to get the craters of the moon. And then you have to open it way up to get the stars. And then the moon just looks like a white ball. It always looks full. And so I had to do both of those and then get into post-processing and do a thing, right? And it doesn't look great, but I'm coming along. I can't spend too much time in that place. I got other things to do. Like in the middle of the night drive to go see a Pleiadian occultation, because what is it? So in this second picture at 3:04 a.m. on the right side of the screen, 15 minutes later, the moon has now moved along in her course, which is from the west to the east, and she has consumed Alcyone, right? So you can see just when you look at the moon's orientation with respect to these four stars of the Pleiades, can you see how the moon's moved? And in that movement towards Atlas and Pleione, the moon has covered Alcyone. That's an occultation, yeah? And as I said before, Merope was actually occulted this entire time. If I was out there longer, then I would have seen Merope uncovered first, and then later Alcyone, as the moon went on to occult Atlas and Pleione. And in other places, moon would have seen also occulting other stars, like I can't remember which one this is, the Teapot, I think, and Maya. Now, the moon can only occult the Pleiades at all because the Pleiades are 5 degrees north of the ecliptic, which, by the way, is my arm. Okay, so this is the path of the sun. Every month, the moon snakes above and below the path of the sun, crossing the sun's path at the lunar nodes. Okay, so here's the Pleiades, who reside about 5 degrees north of the ecliptic. So the moon has to cross the ecliptic going north far enough before the Pleiades to get to the Pleiades. And that actually happened in Coach Smiley's birth in 1931 when the North Node was in Aries, in tropical Aries. In our day and age, and this will change with precession. Just as the Pleiades recently and currently actually processing from tropical Taurus to tropical Gemini, that's a sign of our day and age. In our day and age, the Pleiades, they mark the cusp between tropical Taurus and tropical Gemini. They have spent like 2,100 years in tropical Taurus, and now they are processing into tropical Gemini. There are stars of the Pleiades that still reside in the very last degree of Taurus. I think Alcyone got across in 1970 something. Maya processed across the Gemini into the Gemini side of that gateway in July of 2023. So like even having a Pleiadian occultation in our day and age where the Pleiades mark the Taurus Gemini cusp, I would expect that to express differently than it would have 2,100 years ago when they were at the cusp of tropical Aries and Taurus, or 2,100-ish years before that when they were at the tropical Pisces Aries cusp, or 2,160 years from now when they will be at the Gemini Cancer cusp. What's the Gemini Cancer cusp? It's the North Pole of Earth, right? Like that maybe will be an even bigger deal than right now, when they are at a place 30 degrees before that zone of the sun's path that Earth's North Pole eternally points towards. That's the nature of the tropical zodiac. It's about the tropics. It's about the directions. Cardinal Cancer, cardinal north, all right? But right now, maybe we're having a more significant thing, which this points to Orion's club, and this leans towards the galactic center. And that should be a talk for another time. Really, that's a course. Okay. So I had these experiences when I was out there, but the main thing that happened, and it likely did happen because I did a lot of work around the Pleiades recently. There is at my website, GeminiBrett.com. Hey, Winters, thanks for saying that. Winter says, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, folks. Yeah, give it a like, share it around. Thanks, Winter, for always supporting my work and reminding others to do as well. I very much appreciate that, as does Nadine. both of those amazing beings are in constellations, very active and awesome participants in the School of Astrology's membership community. Come check it out, geminibrett.com/constellations, or just click the communities tab at geminibrett.com. There's another tab that says courses. Check out the fixed star class. So I spoke about the Bohemian stars there a bit. Not bohemian, by the way, but Bohemian. And I was really kind of focused on the Pleiades, and I brought in all sorts of teachers to also tune in. It's a really fun class. We'll learn a lot of techniques for working with fixed stars, besides just their zodiac degrees, like working with parallels, working with parans, and then kind of artistically playing with stars. And so let me show you an example of that by the great Joe G, who was along with that journey as one of the many kind of guest teachers or guiding lights. This is a talisman that Joe created during that journey of the seven sisters. There's much more to see here. There were some things like you might be able to see a bear here in the background that I asked Joe to add to his work, because of native stories actually about Bear's Lodge and the Pleiades and who the Pleiades are, and some of the I guess mythic tales of native peoples here in the land where I now live. And there are things in the Renaissance tradition that it's good to have around when you honor the Pleiades, like their sigils, of which there have been a couple different versions. Like the Pleiades are different than the other Bohemian stars in many regards. And while this isn't meant to be like an astro magic class, just honor that that's a thing, that the genie lamp is part of the Pleiadian tradition. So outside this room, I still have 7 candles and a candelabra, which is part of like the Pleiadian thing, my genie lamp, some fennel, which is a Pleiadian plant, some quartz crystal, which is associated with the Pleiades in the magical tradition. I actually bought this quartz cluster to celebrate the Pleiades. This is one of my talismans from that event, and there's other things I probably shouldn't reveal. This was there as well, because the seed of life, this 6 around 1, is another very beautiful image of the 7, and I could go on in that regard. So anyways, really trying to open my heart to the Pleiades. It's said in the tradition that the Pleiades will open our experience when celebrated magically, and will open our experience of sight. So not only sight in the terrestrial realms, that can be helpful for eyesight, but also to the celestial or the hidden realms. Now, the Pleiades have been associated for a long time, along with other fuzzy things in the sky, like the Andromeda galaxy or the Beehive cluster, other clusters, which just kind of look furry, with like eye issues. So having the sun or the moon conjunct the Pleiades in the tradition might actually speak to problems with our eyes. It's an interesting thing to explore, but then we can work magically with them to actually increase our sight in the visible realms and into the invisible realms. Now, I will say a drag in my Pleiadian occultation experience was that I couldn't see it with my naked eye. So the Pleiades, like individually, they're not that bright. But because they're all kind of combining forces as a bunch of like not very bright stars, but in a very compact like area of space, like they're quite visible. But when this very bright moon came around, I couldn't see him at all. I could see Aldebaran, I could see Jupiter, a lot of Jupiter right now. I could see Mars, I could see the twins and Orion, I could see all sorts of beings, okay? I'm seeing a hawk right now, by the way. Remind me to get to some stories of the sun, as does Orion, as I just spoke that name. But the only way I was able to experience that Pleiadian occultation was through my zoom lens. And like it's quite a zoom lens, this thing. It like goes to 600 if you speak that language, right? And so like this thing's on a tripod. and I'm looking at them. I've been meaning to set up a telescope that was recently given by a friend actually in Hawaii. So I can start like even seeing closer and see what that does to my astrology and whatnot. But so that was an interesting thing. It's like, wow, moon is bright enough that when she gets this close to the Pleiades, like the Pleiades are actually just occulted by the moonlight in general. And that's going to bring me to sun conjunctions and Cazimis. But what I felt was this, that moon, who we know has much to do with soul and much to do with feels. And I will say that, like, being away from my home, being in a place that I don't know much about, some of the encounters I saw there, like I didn't feel entirely safe. And moon, in her nurturing force, wants us to. So I got a really wonderful, had a really wonderful experience of moon in the Pleiades when Maya, our baby, was so young. And many of you will remember I was kind of telling my stories about her name and some of the tales of Maya, the mother of Hermes, and about Arctis and other things. And I went down to the park down here and saw moon nursing the Pleiades, so moon nursing Maya. It's not an occultation that day, they were conjunct. Right above this room where my beloved Scorpiana was nursing our daughter Maya, right? And then Jupiter was right above Koa's room over. It was just like one of the most amazing things. And this, I don't know if you can hear Isabel snoring, but my dog and I were down there and I was just like, oh, like I was having such an amazing astronomical experience of a thing I had just that day been kind of storytelling about. So what came through the other night, and it's going to be kind of my running model of what an occultation does, and then it's my hope that I will get to connect with people, and my experience suggests that what will happen in my counseling work in the next few months is that I'll get more and more opportunity to sit with people who were born during an occultation or just before an occultation. And then I'll kind of get into like feeling them and just see if I can see something similar showing up. And if there's like a pattern there that can maybe confirm what I found the other night, found in quotation modes, that I'm feeling. So the ears of my heart heard, as I hide this star, you will feel its hidden messages. So let me say this, like moon conjunct a star typically means moon next to that star. Like occultations are kind of rare. So for example, when I was born, the moon's south node was in Taurus. And so here's the Pleiades and the moon was like well beneath them 3 days before my birth. When Anna was born, though the moon was not with the Pleiades, 5 days later, the moon actually would have occulted the Pleiades. When Coach Smiley was born, the moon would have occulted the Pleiades. Every month, but not visible from his birthplace or from Pittsburgh, California. Every month it has to be nighttime. It has to do with parallax, right? So I'll be able to experience other Pleiadian occultations before the nodes move retrograde as they do through the zodiac in such a way that the Pleiades won't be occulted again for literally 18 and a half years. Like the nodes, I don't know what the range of time. I'd love to learn how to explore these things. There's a lot of astronomy I'd love to learn. There's only a short window of time every 18.6 years. That's the lunar nodes transit through the zodiac when the north node is in such a place that the moon will north enough above the ecliptic plane to occult the Pleiades. Now, if the moon does that when crescent, I might have more opportunity to see it with my naked eye because the moon will be less likely to blind me to the Pleiadian experience because she's just so bright. However, when do we see crescent moons? Waxing crescent after sunset, waning crescent before sunrise. So the sun gets into the mix. So speaking of sunrise, I wanted to tell this tale. Orion, I prefer some of the older images for the stars that we call Orion. Like it's said that Osiris or Asur was, after moving through the Duat, the underworld, found his heavenly home there in the stars that we know, most of us know as Orion. To the Babylonians, there was a time when that group of stars, that constellation, was called the True Shepherd of Anu. Anu being an image of the heavens themselves, and also having something to do with bands of declination. Enki, low stuff, Enki, a god of the earth, and Leo, very high stuff, and Leo, a god of the air, and then Anu, the band in between of stuff like in the middle, kind of around equinox space. Okay, well, Orion's belt, and this changes with the great year, precessional year of about 26,000 years. Orion's belt is now on the equator, the celestial equator, which is an amazing truth about Orion that sadly it's not known or taught much in astrology today. Orion's club points to the most northern point of the sun's path, which is the Tropic of Cancer in our day and age. That is a very short window of time within the great year of 26,000 years, and it's a big deal. And it's in the prophetic traditions, from the Celts to the Egyptians to the Bible, to the painting on the Capitol dome in the United States, capital of Washington, D.C., if I'm right. Okay. Anyway, in the Greek view, Orion wasn't the coolest dude. He was a son of Poseidon, this giant, who was so giant that he could walk the seafloor and still have his shoulders above. And I believe that's actually a tale of a very ancient time when, due to precession then, Orion was pointing to the Tropic of Capricorn, the lowest point in the Greek view, and therefore Orion was much, much lower in the sky than he travels these days, and literally would walk on the ocean floor, and you could only see the shoulders. Anyway, Orion did all sorts of nasty shit, like telling Artemis, who they would compete because they were great archers, that he was better than her, and he was so good that he could kill everything on Earth. And then Gaia created the scorpion of the heavens to chase Orion, kill him for saying such a terrible thing, making sure he didn't commit this terrible act. And part of that's an astronomical tale, because when Orion sets, the scorpion rises. So you see the scorpion chases Orion out of the sky. Well, there's another astronomical tale, which is this. Orion, for some terrible things he did, was said to have been blinded, lost sight. But he was also shown that he could, if he went to the right place at the right time, reclaim his vision. He found a guide, a young one, to bring him east, because he had to bring his non-seeing eyes to the light of the rising sun, and his sight would be returned to him. Okay. Well, for me, this is absolutely an astronomical tale that happens every year. Just as Orion chasing the Pleiades in many different traditions, including the bear chasing the little girls and whatever, like it's what's written in the heavens, because the Pleiades travel like this and Orion follows them. And that will never stop. But what is Orion losing his sight and then going to the sunrise in the east to reclaim it? It's called Orion going under the beams of the sun, and then followed by Orion's heliacal rise. Because every year, here's Orion. In our day and age, it's when the sun ingresses Cancer. Literally, it's on like the hand of the high man, to use the terms of the Celtic prophetic tradition, but it's on Orion's clubs. Like Orion's eating solar snow cones. And in our little astronomy apps, we can see that when the sun ingresses Cancer, it's on Orion's club. When you go outside, what do you see? The sun. And you see no Orion. Why? The sun, right? So what happens with Orion is it's evening stars, and then day by day the sun gets closer and closer, and it takes Orion, what we call, under the beams. And then sun gets even closer and Orion's combust. We just can't see him. He's still above the ground after sunset, but it's too bright, the sun's rays. Then the sun conjoins Orion, that's called the Cazmi, and then the sun passes by. And when the sun passes by far enough, now Orion is seen again by earthling eyes, helically rising in the east, being reborn as morning stars. And this happens with Sirius, and it happens with Mars. With Mars, it's kind of a different pace. Why? Because Mars is a wanderer too, like the sun. And so it takes the sun a long time to chase Mars down, but he does, you know. So why do I bring this up? Well, there's many old myths like the birth of Hermes from Maya's cave after Jupiter visited her there in a place that Hera could not, or Juno could not see. I should say Zeus visitor because I'm speaking Greek when I say Maya. That has everything to do, in my opinion, with an expression of stars or planets going under the beams. Okay, like Maya, who chose to leave the celestial abode and live in a cave on Earth. For me, that's talking about Sun conjunct Pleiades, which happens every year, and then the Pleiades are reborn, and it's a big deal. Like in Hesiod's work in days, it's one of the things that we should plan our agricultural calendar around. Well, while the moon can occult the star, and it happens literally just for like an hour, right? The moon is half a degree wide. The moon moves half a degree in like an hour's time. So the moon will come eat Saturn and then spit Saturn out the other side. What happened? And what I'm feeling now, and because the moon has much to do with feelings, is that this is about moon through the eyes, in the ears of the heart, not the eyes. It's something we cannot see, but don't we have our greatest visions with our eyes closed? Through the ears of the heart, through the ears of the feels, which are going to be more open when safe. Okay, let me just share this about like Anna and Maya versus me and Maya. When Maya's sleeping on Anna's chest and the baby thing, it's like and loud. Like when she's sleeping on my chest, I'm like Maya, and just walking around drumming on her, making warrior sounds, whatever. Like there's a difference of like, okay, we calm, and so we're safe. And like you are safe because I'm loud and here to protect you. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's some whole kind of, you know, Paleolithic stuff going on in that. Do with that what you will. Cancel me if you need to. Okay. So for moon, I feel like through our feels in an occultation experience, like a conjunction, but not occultation, which is typical. Typically, like moon will go below the Pleiades, above in the southern hemisphere point of view. It's like she brings our attention to this thing. Although moon is so bright and the Pleiades are not, that actually this is one of the things I experienced the other night. They might go away anyway. But then when moon occults them, it's like that energy gets lensed through her body. I mean, in the physics, maybe like gravitational lensing even. But so we have an opportunity with the ears of our heart to hear the hidden messages. So when somebody asks about, you know, what is Alcyone, what I would say is, because we are in this time now of the potential of lunar occultations, it is a wonderful time, whether you're in a place on Earth where it can be seen by your eyes or not, to at those times really tune into, maybe you're dreaming, setting the intention of a dream. Can I hear with the ears of my heart the hidden messages of Alcyone? And I think you're going to receive new stories that maybe look different than what we hear in the pages of the ancient astrologers or the Renaissance magicians or whatever. There is a tradition of the Pleiades being associated with quartz crystal. And I'm actually surprised that I didn't bring some of the things that I've worked on magically with the Pleiades to my experience the other night. I intend to be in a van just driving away from the fog. So maybe when the next occultation comes around, I'll have more of an opportunity. But again, it's better not to bring things and tell them what they do. And so we can just experience the being, you know? So what about sun conjunct a planet or sun conjunct a star? Sun star every year, sun Jupiter every 399 days, sun Saturn every 378, sun Mars about every 2 years, right? Sun Venus, it depends which way, but every 19 months. Like, and what about Venus on this side or that side? And I want to, like, I was hoping to today, but it's going to have to be another time, get to the once every 6.5 years, Earth, Sun, Venus, Mars, and the Venus Mars conjunctions under the beams or combust or even Cazmi. So in the medieval tradition, the criterion for Cazmi, which some say means in the heart of it or in the throne room. I need to learn a lot more about the etymology and the language. It's not my forte, as you've already found, to understand more about that. But basically, in the day, if a planet is within 15 degrees of the sun, in a way, it's said to be weakened because it's under the beams of the sun and we can't see it anymore. Now, for Venus, by the way, a 10-degree rule is more appropriate, and it really depends on the sign and where on Earth you're looking from, and that's also a tale for another time. But, you know, for sky guys like me, when a planet disappears, it's hard. I miss them. And I also understand they're kind of going into the flames to be reborn. Okay, so for the moon, this is a very short experience. For the sun, for Jupiter, it's 40 days and 40 nights. For Venus and Mars, it can be like 2 to 3 months. And it's a big deal, as far as I'm concerned. For astrologers who start with Pluto, why would it matter? You can't ever see Pluto with your eyes anyway, you see. But I start with the moon and the sun and what is most visible. And I actually honor that the sun, in another way, is the most invisible because the sun hides the stars from our eyes, and that's a big deal. So in the tradition, like 15 degrees within the sun under the beams, like there's a weakening. Within 8.5 degrees, combust even more so. They're in the flames of the sun. There's some kind of like compost going down, okay? But within 1 degree, according to the Hellenistic astrologers, on either side of the sun, Cazmi, and it's all good. It's like, what? Like, why? That's the middle of this time of their invisibility. Why would that be the thing? So this is another thing that I heard, where I'm starting to like translate through what I experienced in this Pleiadian occultation, thanks to literally a Zoom lens the other day, and the scientists, the astronomers who told me like when it would happen. Well, I should say I found that actually this one out on the software. That the occultation will help you feel the hidden messages of that which was occulted, planet or star, where the Cazmi will is the right word. The will of that planet or star will be done. So I'm going to have to leave that there. It's kind of where I wanted to start, as I was trying to do that earlier, but I don't know. I have to have the adventure, because if I didn't, we wouldn't have gone to Mauna Kea, which I really didn't intend to today. And into that whole conversation, I didn't mean to get into the conversation about astronomy versus astrology or astronomy versus correspondences so much. But hopefully you can hear, this is my intent and my approach and my practice. Let me go out and experience the astronomical thing and try not to tell it what it is, but ask it what it is. And through my own experience, including things like car stereos, and statues of like the random place where I parked, I'm going to understand more about what a thing might be. And hopefully that can help me live a more interesting life. I wish this for you too. And I really appreciate you spending some time with me here at Starry Telling Hour. For those of you who are in constellations, by the way, and I'll speak more about this next week, because Starry Telling Hour next week is actually during the lunar eclipse. So I'll speak about the lunar eclipse, I think, on Starry Telling Hour on Wednesday. Just the stars align. But in constellations on the Saturday following, we're going to look at that eclipse in collective, in community, and through all 12 of the signs, for all 12 of the rising signs. or you can do it with sun signs or moon signs or whatever, okay? So I'll tell you more about that next week, but for now, it'd be a great time to join Constellations. $16 a month, different teacher every week, organized, well, at least scheduled community discussions. Great time to connect with beings of like mind and heart to explore this wonderful sacred science of ours. Thank you for the present of your presence to do some of that together here today. I really appreciate your contributions, both through comments and energetically. I go to these places because of you as much as because of me. All right. See you in space, friends.